In the time before memory hardened into history, when the world was still learning its own name, there existed a land called Obanda. The mountains here did not merely stand. They hummed with ancient songs, melodies that predated human tongues. The rivers flowed without rest, carrying secrets from one generation to the next, whispering stories that only the stones could fully understand. The people of Obanda understood their place in creation's grand design. They were farmers, hunters, weavers, and storytellers, each playing their part in the rhythm that governed all things. They rose with the sun, worked beneath its watchful eye, and surrendered to darkness when the moon claimed the sky. This was not burden but blessing, not limitation but freedom within boundaries that made sense. Every morning, before the first rooster dared to crow, the people would hear it, the call that split dream from waking. Ọfọma, Ọfọma. The golden bird would rise from its nest atop the hill of ages, wings spreading like liquid sunlight, voice carrying the weight of cosmic responsibility. Where Ọfọma flew, light followed. Where it rested, darkness fell like a gentle blanket. The Hill of Ages was not like other hills. It stood at the center of Obanda, at equal distance from the 4 compass points, a place where earth reached toward heaven with deliberate purpose. Ancient trees grew there, their roots deeper than wells, their branches home to creatures that existed nowhere else. At its summit, in a nest woven from starlight and morning mist, dwelt the keeper of time itself. Okonkwo was the priest of Ani, the earth goddess, and he was ancient even by the measure of ancient things. His face was a map of wrinkles, each line a story, each crease a lesson learned through decades of service. He tended the shrine with reverent hands, speaking to the goddess in prayers that smelled of palm wine and kola nut. He knew secrets that the young dismissed and wisdom that the proud ignored. Life in Obanda moved to a rhythm as reliable as heartbeat. Farmers tilled red earth that stained their hands the color of heritage. Women balanced clay pots on their heads, water sloshing gently as they walked with impossible grace. Children chased chickens through compound yards, while old men played draft beneath the shade of iroko trees, moving seeds across boards worn smooth by countless games. Everything had its time. Everything had its place. Once each year, during the festival of first light, the entire village would climb the Hill of Ages. They would stand in reverent silence as Ọfọma emerged from its nest, would watch as the bird traced patterns across the awakening sky. The priest would offer prayers. Young men would beat drums that echoed like thunder. Women would dance, their movements mirroring the bird's flight. It was reminder and renewal, gratitude made manifest. Among the young men of Obanda, none stood taller or straighter than Obidike. His name meant the heart is strong, and he wore it like armor. He could track a leopard through dense forest, could shoot an arrow through the eye of a needle at 50 paces. Other hunters respected him. Women admired him. Children followed him like ducklings trailing their mother. But pride, like termites in timber, works invisible destruction. It began as a whisper in Obidike's mind, a small voice that grew louder with each passing moon. Why should half of life be spent in darkness? Why should productive hours be surrendered to sleep? While others accepted the rhythm of day and night as natural law, Obidike saw only wasted potential. His ambition had no outlet in a world that had already found its balance. The spirits tried to warn him. In dreams, Obidike saw the world burning under endless sun, saw rivers turned to dust, saw children crying for the mercy of night that would not come. But pride has a way of reinterpreting warnings as challenges, of transforming prophecy into provocation. Each morning, Obidike woke more convinced that he alone understood what needed to be done. Obidike began to speak his thoughts aloud. at first only to his closest friend, Emeka, a fellow hunter who listened with growing unease. "Think of what we could accomplish," Obidike urged, "if we never had to stop for night. We could hunt around the clock, could build great things, could achieve immortality through our works." Emeka saw the dangerous gleam in his friend's eyes and said nothing. Word reached the elders, as word always does in villages where secrets travel faster than rumors. They convened in the Nenqua market square, under the ancient umbrella tree, where all important decisions were made. Okonkwo the priest spoke gravely. "There is a poison spreading among us, more dangerous than viper venom. It is the belief that we can improve upon divine order." But the young men, emboldened by Obidike's rhetoric, shifted restlessly. Okonkwo summoned Obidike to the shrine of Ani. The earth goddess's dwelling was a simple mud structure, but power radiated from it like heat from fire. Inside, the air smelled of incense and history. "Obidike," the priest said, his voice heavy with foreknowledge, "do not anger the balance of creation. Ọfọma flies not for you, but for all things. To hold it is to hold time itself." Obidike laughed. It was not the easy laughter of joy, but the harsh bark of one who mistakes skepticism for sophistication. "Old man," he said, "you speak of balance as if it were sacred, but I speak of progress. Why should we be slaves to the whims of a bird?" Okonkwo's eyes filled with sorrow. "Because some chains," he said softly, "are not bondage but wings." Obidike's mother, Neka, was a woman of quiet strength. She had raised her son alone after his father died in a wrestling match, had sacrificed everything to see him grow tall and proud. She knelt before him, hands clasped. "My son," she begged, "I see darkness in your eyes where light once lived. Whatever you are planning, abandon it. I would rather have you alive and ordinary than dead and legendary." Emeka tried one last time. They sat by the river, watching water striders dance across the surface. "Brother of my heart," Emeka said, "I fear for you. This path you're walking leads only to emptiness. Fame is fool's gold. Leave Ọfọma to its sacred duty." But Obidike's jaw was set like stone. "You don't understand," he said. "History remembers the bold, not the cautious." The market women noticed the change in Obidike, who once joked and haggled. Now he walked through their midst like a man in trance. They whispered among themselves, wondering what possessed the village's finest hunter. "Pride," said old Mama Odera, grinding pepper with practiced motions. "I've seen it before. Pride that swallows a man from inside out." One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of farewell, Obidike stood at the edge of the village and made his choice. He would climb the Hill of Ages. He would capture Ọfọma. He would become the master of time itself. The decision settled over him like dust after a storm, inevitable, complete, irreversible. He did not sleep that night. Instead, he prepared his bow, sharpened his arrows, and waited for the moon to rise. The Hill of Ages had never known hostile feet upon its slopes. For generations, only the reverent had climbed its paths, pilgrims seeking blessing, priests performing rituals, children learning the old ways. Now, under cover of darkness, Obidike ascended with weapons in hand and violence in heart. The trees seemed to lean away from him. The wind spoke in tongues of warning. Even the earth beneath his feet felt reluctant to support his weight. At the summit, surrounded by mist, as thick as cotton and alive with the murmur of ancient spirits, Obidike found what he sought. The nest glowed faintly, as if containing the essence of every sunrise that had ever been. And there, sleeping in innocence that knew nothing of human ambition, lay Ọfọma. The bird's feathers shifted through colors that had no names, gold bleeding into amber, copper dancing with flame. Its chest rose and fell with the breathing rhythm of creation itself. Obidike drew his bow. The string sang a note of tension, wood creaking under the strain of what was about to be unleashed. For one suspended moment, he could have chosen differently. He could have lowered the weapon, could have descended the hill, could have lived out his days as merely mortal. But pride has a gravity on its own. The arrow left the string with a sound like tearing silk. When the arrow struck, Ọfọma's cry split the world in two. It was not a mere bird sound, but the voice of violated cosmic order, a scream that carried the weight of every sunset that would now never come. The sky turned crimson, as if the heavens themselves were bleeding. Thunder without clouds rolled across Obanda, and the sun froze in place like a frightened animal. Obidike's aim was achieved. The sun was out and shining brightly. After hours of daylight, night did not come. The people of Obanda waited, as they had always waited, for darkness to claim its rightful half of existence. But the sky remained bright, the sun hanging like an accusation above the western horizon. Children pointed and wondered. Adults exchanged nervous glances. The elders knew immediately something fundamental had broken. At first, the villagers celebrated. No more darkness. They cried, dancing in streets lit by perpetual day. No more fear of leopards stalking in shadow, no more cold nights. Young men boasted about the work they would accomplish. Mothers imagined watching their children play without worry of sunset. Even some elders allowed themselves to hope that perhaps this change might be blessing rather than curse. But the land knows what humans forget. Plants need darkness as surely as they need light. Without the cool mercy of night, without the dew that forms in darkness, without the rest that allows growth to consolidate, the crops began to suffer. First the leaves yellowed, then stems grew brittle. Within days, fields that had promised abundance now whispered warnings of famine. Water, too, operates by laws older than human desire. The rivers of Obanda had flowed without rest since the world's beginning, but they had always been fed by the balance of evaporation and return, by the cycle of heat and cool. Under endless sun, evaporation became one-way transaction. Springs that had never failed began to trickle, then drip, then cease entirely. The great river that divided the village became a memory written in cracked mud. Perhaps the cruelest consequence was visited upon the children. Human bodies are designed for rest, for the restoration that only darkness can bring. But the children of Obanda could not sleep beneath eternal daylight. They grew hollow-eyed and irritable, crying without reason, stumbling with exhaustion, but unable to find the release of slumber. Mothers sang lullabies to no effect. Fathers told bedtime stories that led nowhere but back to waking. Okonkwo stood at the shrine of Ani and wept. He had lived long enough to see many mistakes, many small violations of cosmic order. But this was different. This was not the breaking of a rule, but the shattering of a foundation. The balance is broken, he told the gathered elders, his voice barely above a whisper. Time itself has been stolen. Obidike tried to conceal what he had done. He kept Ọfọma in his hut, covering the cage with thick cloth to muffle the bird's faint, sorrowful calls. But light cannot be truly hidden. Even through layers of fabric, a glow seeped out, painting his walls with accusatory illumination. And at night, or what should have been night, when he tried to sleep, the bird's eyes watched him with sadness deeper than anger. You have doomed your people, Ọfọma said softly. Its voice was not harsh, but filled with the gentle grief of one witnessing unnecessary suffering. Time was not meant to be chained. It is not a possession, but a process. Not a thing, but a rhythm. You have tried to own what can only be honored. But Obidike, though guilt gnawed at it like rats in grain stores, but could not yet surrender his prize. I will fix this, he insisted. I will make you fly again, but on my terms. The first feather fell on the third day of endless light. Obidike found it in the morning, or what would have been morning if such distinction still mattered, lying on the floor of his hut, like a dropped coin of gold. The bird's plumage, once so radiant it hurt to look upon, was beginning to fade, and with each feather that fell, Obidike felt something shift within his own body. He noticed it first in his hands. The skin that had been smooth and strong now showed wrinkles like tiny rivers branching across a delta. His joints ached where they had never ached before. Gray appeared in his hair overnight, not gradually, but in sudden, shocking streaks. The mirror, a polished piece of bronze he had traded for, showed him a face he barely recognized. Time, denied its natural course in the world, was extracting payment from the thief himself. It did not take long for the people to understand what had happened. Obidike's mother, visiting his hut with food he could no longer stomach, saw the cage, saw the bird, saw her son's face, aging like fruit left too long in market sun. Her scream brought others running. Within an hour, the entire village knew that Obidike had stolen Ọfọma, had broken the sacred order, had brought curse upon them all. They came for him with fury born of fear and suffering. Young men whose crops had died, mothers whose children could not sleep, elders who knew the depth of cosmic violation. They surrounded his hut, calling for justice, demanding he return what he had stolen. But Ọfọma held up a withered hand. "Violence will not restore balance," he said. "Only right action can undo wrong." Obidike stood before his people, no longer the proud hunter, but a man rapidly being consumed by consequences. The bird in its cage looked weaker with each passing hour. "Tell us how to fix this," Emeka pleaded with his friend, "before there is nothing left to save." But Obidike had no answers. He had planned the theft with meticulous care, but had never considered what would follow success. Ọfọma spoke of a woman who lived in the distant hills, beyond where ordinary travelers dared venture. The High Priestess they called her, though some said she was no mere mortal, but a spirit who had taken human form out of pity for mankind. "If anyone knows how to restore stolen time," Ọfọma said, "it is her. But the journey is perilous, and she does not grant audience to the unworthy." With the bird carried in a basket woven from palm fronds, the same palms he had climbed as a boy, chasing adventures that now seemed innocent, Obidike set out. His mother blessed him through tears. Mecca pressed provisions into his hands. Even those who had called for his blood fell silent as he left, recognizing that he was walking not toward redemption, but toward a reckoning that might consume him entirely. The first trial was the desert. Under the sun that never set, the sand had become like walking on coals. Heat rose in waves that made the horizon shimmer and dance. Obidike wrapped cloth around his head and feet, but still the heat found ways to torment him. His water ran low, his lips cracked. The bird, barely breathing now, lay at the bottom of the basket like a dying ember. Beyond the desert lay a forest unlike any in Obanda. Here, trees grew so close together their branches wove a canopy, thick as thatch. Light filtered through in green-tinted shafts. And everywhere whispers. Voices that spoke his name, that reminded him of every boast, every moment of pride, every time he had chosen ambition over wisdom. The forest knew his sins and spoke them back to him in chorus. The third trial was the strangest. A valley where drums beat constantly, rhythm without pattern, sound without source. As Obidike walked through it, he felt time itself becoming unreliable. One step took an hour. The next took a second. He aged years in a heartbeat, then grew young again just as quickly. The ghosts of moments he had stolen wandered this valley, and they murmured his name with both voices of accusation and pity. At last he reached the river of shadows. It was not like any river in the natural world. Its waters were dark as midnight, and they flowed not downstream but upward, defying gravity, rising into clouds that never formed rain. The banks were lined with stones that hummed with ancient power, and across the water, dimly visible through mist, stood the High Priestess. She was old in a way that had nothing to do with years. Her eyes held the weight of watching civilizations rise and fall. Her voice, when she spoke, seemed to come from the river itself. "Obidike," she said, and hearing his name from her lips felt like judgment. "You come seeking to restore what you have broken, but restoration always costs more than theft. Are you prepared to pay?" "Time," the priestess explained, "is not a thing but a covenant between creation and creator. It flows because all parties agree to its flow. Ọfọma does not control time. The bird is time's physical expression, the embodiment of agreement. When you caged the bird, you did not capture time. You violated the covenant, and such violations must be repaired with sacrifice. To restore time's flow," she continued, "you must give back what you stole, but you did not merely steal the bird. You stole the possibility of rest from your people, the rhythm from the world, the balance from creation. These things cannot be repaid with gold or goats or grain. They can only be repaid with the thief's own time, all of it." Obidike stood at the river's edge, understanding finally that this journey had been one way from the beginning. He could return to Obanda and live out whatever days his aging body had left, letting the world remain broken. Or he could step into the river, pay the price, and restore what he had stolen. The bird, sensing the moment's gravity, lifted its head and sang faintly, but sang nonetheless. Before Obidike could decide, his reflection appeared in the dark water, but it was not the aged, wrinkled version of himself that mirrors currently showed. It was him as he had been on the night of the theft, strong, proud, young, full of the arrogance that had led him here. "I am the you that was," the reflection said, stepping out of the water as if through a doorway. "The you before consequence. The you that must be given." The spirit twin reached forward, placed a hand on Obidike's chest, and pulled. It was not painful, not exactly. It felt like falling asleep while standing, like surrendering to gravity, like finally ceasing to fight. The reflection pulled away not just youth, but all the years, all the moments, all the heartbeats Obidike had lived. And as the years flowed out of him and into the river, something extraordinary happened. Ọfọma began to glow. The light started at its heart and spread outward, washing through feathers that grew strong again, filling eyes that had been dulled with captivity. The bird spread its wings wider, until they seemed to encompass the entire valley, and then it sang, "Ọfọma, Ọfọma, Ọfọma." The cry echoed across the river, across the forest, across the desert, across all the miles back to Obanda. In Obanda, the people had gathered in the village square, too exhausted to work, too frightened to hope. Children lay in their mothers' arms, eyes open but unseeing. The fields were brown, the river was memory, and then they heard it, distant but unmistakable, the call of Ọfọma. The sun, which had hung frozen for so many terrible days, began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, it descended toward the western horizon, and when it finally set, the darkness that followed was the sweetest thing the people of Obanda had ever known. As if the universe itself had been holding its breath, rain began to fall. Not the violent storm of destruction, but the gentle, steady rain of restoration. It fell on parched earth and grateful leaves. It filled riverbeds and wells. And in that rain, the people of Obanda stood with faces upturned, letting water wash away the terror of endless day. Children fell asleep in their mother's arms at last, and the world remembered how to breathe. The next morning came not with catastrophe, but with normalcy so beautiful it brought tears. The sun rose gently, painting the sky in familiar colors. Roosters crowed. Birds that had fallen silent during the endless day sang again. People emerged from their homes tentatively, as if testing whether the restoration was real. And on the Hill of Ages, where Ọfọma's nest had always been, they found something unexpected. A pile of white feathers lay at the summit, arranged in a pattern too deliberate to be accidental. And beside them, turned completely to stone, was Obidike's bow, the weapon that had stolen time. The elders recognized it immediately. They understood what it meant. Obidike had paid the price. He had given himself to restore what he had broken. The bow would remain as both memorial and warning. Naka climbed the hill alone. She stood over the white feathers and the stone bow, and she wept. Not for the man her son had become, proud, foolish, destructive, but for the boy he had been. She remembered him laughing, chasing chickens, climbing trees, asking questions about everything. "My son," she whispered to the wind, "you wanted to be remembered, and now you will be, but not as you hoped." Emeka built the first part of what would become the shrine of the lost son. He carried stones from the river, each one representing a memory of friendship. He planted trees that would grow for generations, and he carved into stone the warning that would be repeated to every child of Obanda. Here fell the man who tried to own time. Here begins the lesson that some things cannot be possessed. Okonkwo performed rituals at the shrine for 7 days and 7 nights. He burned incense made from sacred herbs. He poured libations of palm wine on the earth. He spoke to Annie, thanking the goddess for her mercy and allowing restoration. And on the 7th night, the High Priestess appeared to him in dreams. "The balance is restored," she said, "but it is fragile. Guard it well." The festival of first light took on new meaning. Now it was not merely celebration, but remembrance. Gratitude for what had been restored and sober acknowledgement of how easily cosmic order could be violated. Parents brought their children to the Hill of Ages, showed them the white feathers and stone ball, and told the story of Obidike, not to condemn, but to teach. Not to forget, but to remember rightly. But why did he do it? The children always asked. And the elders, growing wiser with each telling, learned to answer honestly. Because he wanted to be more than he was. Because he mistook limitation for imprisonment. Because pride convinced him that his desires were more important than the world's needs. Because he was human, and humans sometimes forget that being human is enough. The bird's call changed after that. It still sang, "Ọfọma, Ọfọma," each dawn and dusk. But now, to those who listened carefully, there was a new note woven into the melody, something that sounded like remembrance, like forgiveness, like the understanding that even from great wrong, wisdom can grow. The bird had not forgotten what happened, but neither did it hold grudge. It simply flew as it was meant to fly. Generations passed. The story of Obidike became legend, then myth, then parable. But the shrine of the lost son remained, maintained by descendants of those who had lived through the endless day. And whenever someone in Obanda felt the stirring of excessive ambition, whenever pride whispered promises of greatness beyond measure, they would walk to the hill. They would stand before the white feathers and stone bow, and they would remember that some boundaries exist not to limit, but to protect. Centuries later, when travelers came to Obanda, asking about the strange shrine on the hill, the old ones would smile. That, they would say, is where we learn the most important lesson. Every sunrise is a gift, not a possession. Time flows for all of us, not for any one of us. And the person who tries to control what belongs to all will lose even what belongs to him. Then they would point to the horizon. where Ọfọma could sometimes be seen, a golden streak against the dawn sky, still singing the world awake, still keeping the covenant, still reminding creation that balance is not bondage, but the very condition of freedom. And the traveler would nod, perhaps understanding, perhaps not, but the story would be told again, as it always had been, as it always would be, as long as the birds still flew and the sun still rose and humans still needed reminding that some things are sacred precisely because they cannot be owned. To this day, when the dawn comes late or the sunset lingers too long, the elders would say, Ọfọma is remembering Obidike, the man who stole time and paid for it with his own. Moral: he who tries to control what belongs to all will lose even what belongs to him. Every sunrise is a gift, not a possession.